Coaches, it doesn't mean you've done anything wrong if a client leaves. And in fact, sometimes it actually means you're doing something right. And today I wanted to talk about why and when it's the right time to let a client go. I think all professionals in different fields experience this time when the communication with a colleague or a client can change over time. And I consider myself a coach first and foremost. I do work in the fitness field and I am a fitness professional. And I do think that I know a lot about my field, but I think I prioritize myself as a coach and I study coaches in other fields as well. And one of the main drivers, main motivators, main inspirations of my entire career, someone of course I've never met, but have listened and watched a lot of, is Coach Belichick. He used to coach the New England Patriots. And it's very well known that he coached all of his players in a very similar fashion. No matter who they were, how much money they made, or how good or how great or how not known the player may have been, they were all coached equally. And it's very well known that, it reached a kind of a breaking point with him and his best player, where after 20 years, the best player was wanting to be treated differently. And I'm talking about Tom Brady here. He wanted to be treated a little bit differently. He expected after 20 years that relationship would adapt to his now prestige. And of course, if you follow the sport, you know that relationship ended. They both went their separate ways and continued their career. And that situation, looking at that from the outside as a fan and also as a student of coaching, I think that as a learning experience for myself and something that I can take into my own field and my own practice as a coach. Because I do believe that all coaches reach that point of not being sure how to handle a situation with whether it's a player or a client. If you're in sales, whether it's a customer, that the idea the customer is always right and the client may be always right, but it's not always true. And especially if you're the professional and you're being paid and trusted with the responsibility of getting the best out of somebody in the way that you know and believe in most, then if they're not aligned with that, it has to be okay to say no. And this happens a few different reasons and as a trainer, that happens sometimes because you're building a relationship with your client, and over time that relationship can kind of shift from trainer and client to friend and friend. And if you don't keep control of the relationship, especially inside of the gym, then you can easily reach a point where all of a sudden you're being questioned or ignored, even not because you're viewed as less of a trainer, but because you're viewed as an equal, as a friend. And the truth is, you're not. If you're the coach, if you're the trainer, you're not equal to the client. You are supposed to be the leader, and you're supposed to be in control, and you're supposed to be guiding the person you're working with. And sometimes that becomes difficult, just like working with your girlfriend or wife or husband or boyfriend may be difficult sometimes, because you take in whatever you brought in from the relationship. You bring that argument over waffles or pancakes into the workout, and now it blows up. And letting that relationship that you may have outside of the gym not interfere with the relationship inside of the gym, that is the responsibility of the trainer. I believe that. And as well, the client has to understand that. But it happens, it happens over time where it's inevitable. And if that client is coming back to you out of routine or loyalty to you as a friend, rather than the trust and respect as a coach or as a trainer, then I think there's a conversation that needs to take place. And I think that's a situation where, honesty will always win. And, maybe that's the time where you do go your separate ways, but maybe that's a chance for you to say, okay, look, this is what I've been seeing, I'm recognizing this, and maybe both people can agree and both feel similarly. And if the goals are still, aligned and they still want the same thing, if I want the best for you and you want the best for yourself, then great, let's continue on. But if it's not going to be possible, then having an honest conversation, letting that person go, I think it's okay. Sometimes you can see signs that the relationship isn't working. And they may not be obvious at first, but if you keep getting reschedules or late or missed messages or whatever it may be, if you start feeling these, micro misses in the communication, it's a sign that the relationship is probably on the downturn. And again, if you acknowledge it early enough, you call attention to it early enough as a coach, you have a chance to turn things back around and get things going in the right direction. And if you don't, then it might reach that breaking point where it's, okay, well, we've let this relationship decline to the point where we're not going to build it back up, and better to go your separate ways. But again, I think being constantly aware of these type of things is super important. If you keep trying to satisfy every client and let every client kind of do whatever they want, if you're accepting that this client can become late, and if you're accepting that this client can skip the warm-up, and if you're accepting that this client doesn't have to book on your app, and you're accepting that this client, whatever it may be, can slack up, it's fine. But be aware that that is going to infiltrate and affect all of your other clients and the reputation that you have as a trainer. So I think, it's okay to be like, I'm okay with everybody being late. I'm okay with everybody skipping the warm-up. I'm okay with it all. And that's your personality and that's your reputation. I think that's all great. You don't have to be a certain way. But I do think that if you start trying to treat people differently in terms of what you structure and provide, that's a slippery slope. And that's a very thin line before you become completely irresponsible as a coach. People are coming to you, people are coming to us for structure, for leadership and guidance. And if we're just telling people, okay, come and do whatever you want, pretty much, then people will feel lost, and people are not coming to you for that. People want to come and they want to trust you. So if a client is going off script and doing something outside of your structure, then you have to step up and you have to tell that person why it not only matters for them, why this is what's in their best interest, but also how it affects the whole team that you're working to build. If you're a trainer, you have 20 clients, that's your team. That's your foundation of people, and no one person should be bigger than that whole group. And it affects everybody. If they see, okay, I'm coming and I'm doing my warm-up, and this person comes in and they completely skip it, unless there's a reason for that person that they're aware of, they might start to feel, why is this person being treated differently or better than me? It's a very human thought to have, like comparing ourselves to others. So I think we have to just be aware of that. And it's natural, it's super natural for players or coaches and clients and all these things like to turn over. I'm very lucky. I'm so lucky to have some clients I've been training for more than 10 years. And I think a part of why I'm able to have these super long-term relationships with my clients is my acceptance to let people go, and understanding that if I just bring my best every day then that's all I can control. And if people leave, well, that's not in my control, and that's okay. But if I try to just cling on and claim people as mine without putting in the work and deserving that every single day, then I'm not going to have long-term clients. And it's okay though. It does happen for me and for every client out there, or every trainer out there, and every coach out there. It does happen. Clients leave for one reason or another, whether it's one of the reasons I have already talked about, whether it's their goals have changed, whether they simply want to try something new. And sometimes it just comes down to having a vibe, and the vibe's not aligning. You know, and you can probably catch this. If you've been a coach for a long time, you know from the very, very first day how the vibe is. You know, of course the relationship won't be there by then, but the vibe is. And if they're already pushing and challenging your boundaries as a coach from the very first or second day, then it's not going to end well. And I get it. Like, if you're young in your career, I went through the same thing as a personal trainer. If you're young in your career, you got to kind of take what you can get and just be okay with it and suck it up and be quiet. But if you're an experienced coach and you're later on in your career, then you got to tell people, I think you might not be the best fit for me, and I might not be the best fit for you. And that's okay. We have to be fine. We have to actually be happy with the idea of letting people go without feeling guilt. Because if we let somebody go, it means we're opening ourselves up to accepting somebody who is a better fit for us. You know, we're not supposed to be the best coach for everybody, the perfect coach for everybody. Nobody out there is. Even the greatest sports coach you can think about, any sports coach out there has hundreds of players that hate him or her. You know, and that's natural because we, as professionals, come with our equipment. We come with our program. We come with our values and our system. And this is what we bring. And this is not meant to be a one-size-fits-all system. It's supposed to be a really damn good system, the best we can possibly bring to the table. Hopefully it's good enough that somebody out there is like, you know what? That works really, really well for me. I want that. Sign me up. And as long as we are constantly bringing the best for that person, then let everyone else go and be happy for them. You know, if somebody else finds a better coach for them, it doesn't make that coach better than you. It makes them a better fit for that person. And, you know, this idea of losing the ear of clients and how that happens over time, I think is a super critical point to consider and be aware of. It's a difficult, I think it's a difficult conversation, of course, to have and thing to accept sometimes, because we want to be the best, we want to have more clients, we want to be, but we're not. And it's not fair to ourselves to expect that. It's not fair of others to expect that from them, to just agree with you and be with you, even though that they don't feel it. You know, if you don't feel it and they don't feel it, or it's like a relationship. It's not supposed to be that difficult, right? And you just gotta sit down and tell them, this is what I see, this is what I feel, and I wish you the best. You know, I let you go, and I let you go without guilt. You know, losing a client, it's not failure. It's feedback, and it's very valuable feedback, something that we should take into consideration and should maybe think about adjusting our style in the future. But doesn't mean we have to change our style. It's just something to take in, process, reevaluate, analyze, and if we change our output in the future, then wonderful. And if not, even more wonderful, right? So, you know, again, you can't be everyone's coach, but as long as you lead with honesty, you're going to be the right coach for the right person. And that's what it's all about. So I wanted to talk to you quickly for today, and we'll talk to you soon.